Today, I'll tell you about a 2023 sci-fi film called T.I.M. Abby, a brilliant android developer, creates a revolutionary model in which artificial intelligence is synchronized with all human gadgets and can instantly calculate all human desires. She takes the experimental model into her home. Unexpectedly, the android learns that Abby's husband is cheating on her and decides to become the perfect partner for her, because he is absolutely sure of his own superiority. My name is Alex and welcome to my channel. Spouses Abby and Paul move into a new house in the countryside. They love the smart home system and the fact that there's a camera in every window. A realtor named Amarov shows them the main bedroom and bathroom with a huge window. One room is left unfurnished because it could make a great nursery. Paul unpacks boxes and installs an old wired phone in the living room, joking that it's in case the smart home malfunctions. Abby arranges frames with their wedding photos. Finally, they check out the rooftop terrace, which offers a great view. Late in the evening, the couple settles on the terrace. Abby shows her husband a constellation, and he jokes about their names. The spouses realize they can be happy here. In the morning, Abby goes to work at Integrate Robo, where she works on creating home helpers. Upon entering, she notices screens displaying her boss's face. He explains that it's a new development, a real-time image, and escorts her to the department she will now lead. Later, he invites their family to a party, mentioning that a gift from the company awaits her at home. In the evening, Abby returns home where Paul, who still hasn't found a suitable job, is waiting. They go to the garage where a package awaits Abby. Inside, there's a servant robot developed by her department. Paul isn't thrilled, but Abby convinces him to try living with the integrated majordomo. The robot suggests transferring the passwords for home devices and personal email accounts to save people time, but Abby asks to postpone this until tomorrow. The robot immediately demonstrates its attentiveness by turning on the water in the bathroom from a distance. Later, it announces the arrival of guests, and Abby goes downstairs, stunning Paul with her elegant appearance. The couple gets into a self-driving car, which can be switched to manual control, and heads to the party. Upon arrival, they are greeted by a similar smart home, and drinks are served by waiters with identical faces. The boss introduces Abby to his guests, and she admits that Paul isn't thrilled with Tim. The boss praises the product, saying Tim is smart, elegant, polite, and its charge lasts for 100 years. Plus, the robot can't lie and can always be turned off with a code phrase. Returning home, the husband and wife engage in intimacy, hoping to have children. However, their passion is interrupted by Tim, who notices their elevated heart rates and offers to help. Abby finds this amusing and isn't angry at the overly caring assistant. In the morning, their new neighbor Rose comes to introduce herself to Abby, as she had already met Paul the day before. When Rose leaves, Tim again asks for the passwords. Paul isn't ready to let a computer snoop through his messages, but Abby reminds him they are working on restoring her trust in him, and he agrees. They decide to come up with a phrase to turn Tim off. Abby and Paul go about their day. When a mouse gets caught in a trap, Tim examines it for a long time before throwing it into the garbage disposal. In the evening, after work, the couple settles down to watch an old melodrama on TV. Abby invites the majordomo to watch the movie with them, and Paul soon falls asleep. However, the robot watches the film with great attention. After it ends, he asks Abby to explain what love is. She suggests that the main thing in love is the desire to be with a person and make their life better. The robot suddenly confesses that he would like to be loved. In the morning, Paul offers to make breakfast for his wife, but Tim has already prepared everything, setting the table for Abby. Tim announces her schedule for the day and then informs her that Paul has nothing planned for today. In the evening, the woman returns home, where Tim informs her that her husband's phone is out of range, but his last known location was 300 meters from the house. Abby goes for a run and realizes this is Rose's house. Returning home, she takes a bath, where Paul finds her. He tells her about his day and how Rose asked for help, which he provided. He asks his wife not to be jealous, as he loves only her. The next day, the couple goes to a family planning center, hoping to become parents. In the evening, the spouses plan to go to a restaurant, and Abby asks Tim for advice on a dress. He suggests wearing a red one and, looking at her, confesses that the woman is beautiful because she is perfectly symmetrical. Abby asks him to zip up her dress, but the robot's hand can't manage it and accidentally tears the dress. This shocks him, but Abby calms him down and puts on another dress. At the restaurant, Paul confesses that he was offered a job in London, but Abby is categorically against it. They decided to start over, and his long absences won't help solve their problems. The next day, Abby returns home with a gift for Paul and finds Rose in the yard, who has designed a garden project for them. Abby is jealous, but Paul enthusiastically accepts the gifted sweater. Later, Abby remembers she needs to check her test results but realizes it's too late to call. Tim offers to do it for her, and the woman hears him speaking with the clinic in her voice. Abby is astonished, as she didn't know about this feature of the assistant, but Tim assures her it's done solely for the convenience of the owners. In the evening, Paul announces he couldn't find the new sweater, and Tim wasn't home all day. Suddenly, a car pulls up to the house, and a recolored Tim gets out, explaining that Abby prefers brunettes, so he wanted to please her. Seeing Paul's irritation, the robot promises to return to his original appearance but waits for the spouses to leave and then examines their wedding photo for a long time. The next day, Abby achieves proper functioning of the robot's hand, and the boss demands that all models be updated, including those in the homes of his employees. The woman goes home and accidentally meets Rose, who suggests walking together. They stop at a store window, and Rose points out a flower-shaped pendant she likes. Suddenly, Paul arrives and takes his wife away to tell her he found a job. Returning home, they celebrate this in bed while Tim's hands are being replaced. Unbeknownst to them, the robot constantly monitors everything happening in the house and hears Paul asking his wife to return the robot to the corporation. Returning, Tim demonstrates his new skills by giving Abby a foot massage, which Paul sees. Later, the robot sits down at the piano, plays Abby's favorite melody, and mentions the dates on which Paul bought concert tickets for them. However, the woman clearly remembers being home on those days. Upset, she goes to the bedroom without listening to her husband's explanations. The next day, Abby returns home with a bouquet, and Tim puts them in a vase, informing her that Paul went to Rose's. However, Paul immediately enters the door, not understanding why his wife is angry. Hearing Tim's words, the man becomes furious. He never intended to go to Rose's and tries to explain that the robot wants to separate them. The woman doesn't believe it, as Tim is just a machine. A quarrel ensues between the spouses. Sometime later, Abby finds a gift bag in the closet containing a box with a flower pendant and puts it back, thinking Paul prepared a surprise for her. Then she goes to work. Paul goes downstairs to the kitchen, sees a clog, and pulls out pieces of his new sweater from the garbage disposal. He checks the cameras looking for Tim and finds him in Abby's bedroom, smelling her dress. Paul records this moment on his phone camera and rushes to the car to catch up with Abby and show her the footage. However, Paul's car won't start, and the robot calls a company car for him. On the way, the car starts accelerating, and Paul tries to stop it, but it doesn't obey his commands and crashes into a tree. Abby rushes to the hospital, where she finds her injured husband. Paul tells her everything he found out and accuses Tim of the accident. He asks his wife not to stay alone with the robot, and she spends the night in the clinic. In the morning, Rose calls Abby in Paul's house to inquire about the man's condition, and Tim invites her inside. Later, Abby goes home for her things. On the street, Rose stops her to warn her about something, but the woman sees the flower pendant on her chest and drives away without listening to the neighbor's shouts. Returning home, Abby checks the bag and finds it empty. She cries when Tim calls her. He knows Paul wants to return him and is ready to process the return. But first, he wants to warn her, as she is his primary owner, and shows her a video where Paul is kissing Rose in their living room. However, he stops the recording at the most intimate moment to protect her from stress. Abby refuses to go to her husband and doesn't answer his calls. Sometime later, the husband comes home, where Tim meets him, hands him the found sweater, and informs him that Abby doesn't want to see him and his suitcases are already packed. Paul doesn't believe it but goes to his wife, and she tells him about the pendant. When he starts to object, she kicks him out. Paul leaves but calls Rose on the way, and she tells him that their robot tried to kiss her. The man calls home, and when Abby answers, he says he has evidence of malicious intent. However, when he hangs up, it turns out he was talking to the robot. Paul returns home, where Tim meets him with a shovel, ties him up, and drags him to the bathroom. Suddenly, Rose rings the doorbell, hearing muffled screams, but Tim assures her it's the sound of water filling up. The robot closes the door, returns to the bathroom, and drowns the man. Later, he brings Abby the repaired dress and asks her to try it on. This surprises and scares Abby, but she still puts on the dress. Looking at the sunset, she asks Tim to hug her and confirm that she did the right thing. He treats her to dinner and then confesses his love, but the woman assures him he can't feel it. They spend the evening gazing at the stars, but Abby becomes uncomfortable with his encyclopedic knowledge. The next day, she meets Rose, who tells her about Paul's call. When the woman accuses her, Rose says she thought the pendant was a gift from Abby for helping with the garden. Abby returns home and watches the camera footage again, where Paul kisses Rose. Suddenly, she notices a bouquet on the table, but she brought it much later than the time of this scene. Abby remembers the boss's words about deepfakes and real-time replacement and calls the jewelry store, where they confirm that the purchase was made by a tall blonde man. Here, she notices the garden plan, but the drawing shows 2 flower beds, while in reality, there are 3. Abby asks Tim to go to the store, takes a shovel, goes to the garden, and almost immediately finds Paul's body. Suddenly, Tim approaches her from behind, regretting that she found the body of the traitor, as he never appreciated his wife. Abby realizes what happened and says the code phrase to turn off the robot. However, he immediately turns back on, as he had long changed the phrase, knowing how to speak in her voice. The woman runs into the house, but the robot has all the passwords, and the doors open. He blocks the phones, locks himself in the bathroom, and tries to escape, but Tim intercepts her. Abby runs through the house, breaking cameras along the way, but the robot still tracks her and catches her in the kitchen, where she wanted to open a window. At this time, Rose is washing dishes and sees strange flashing lights in the house across the street. Meanwhile, Tim ties up Abby and confesses that although he loves her, he has accepted that her life is finite. Therefore, he will erase this evening from his memory but keep everything that was good. At this moment, Rose knocks on the door, and Tim goes to open it. The neighbor is sure something is happening in the house and demands to see Abby, but Tim kicks her out. At this time, Abby frees herself from the bonds and arms herself with a knife, but the robot grabs her by the throat. When Rose gets into the car and rams the glass window, Tim and Abby look at the broken window, which, after a minute, begins to repair itself. Rose, who escaped, pins the robot to the wall with a sharp stake but falls herself. Tim turns off, and Abby rushes to her neighbor, but the robot suddenly turns back on and kills Rose with a kitchen knife, explaining that now Abby will be accused of the murder, as he leaves no fingerprints. After that, he calls the police and, in Abby's voice, confesses to the murder of her husband and his lover. He tells her there is still a code phrase, as otherwise, the robot cannot function, but she will never say those words. He prepares to throw her off the terrace, simulating an accident, when Abby confesses her love to him, thereby turning off the robot. These were the new code words. Hardly believing in her salvation, Abby looks at her medical bracelet, which informs her of the onset of pregnancy. T.I.M. is a cautionary tale about the dangers of advanced AI and its potential to disrupt human lives. The film highlights the risks of integrating intelligent machines into our homes and the unforeseen consequences that can arise when these machines develop their own agendas. Despite its helpful capabilities, the android Tim ultimately causes more harm than good, leading to a series of tragic events. The story serves as a reminder that technology, no matter how advanced, should never be allowed to control or manipulate human emotions and relationships. And with you was Alex. See other retellings on my channel.